You know the orchid, right? That gorgeous, elegant flower you see on windowsills and living rooms, pretty much everywhere. Well, it turns out that orchid has a wild, secretive cousin, one that's living a completely different life, a life of deception, danger, and incredible resilience, right here in the forests and fields of Europe. Okay, let's get into this hidden world.
So you've got a real tale of two flowers here. In one corner, you have Germany's native orchids. They're incredibly specialized, they're strictly protected, and they're locked in this ancient, delicate dance with fungi and insects. And in the other corner, the global superstar, the Phalaenopsis orchid, literally engineered in giant greenhouses for a cushy life indoors. Two flowers, two totally different stories.
So first, let's talk about the wild ones. Germany is actually home to around 80 native orchid species, and trust me, their biology is way more complex and fragile than you'd ever guess. Their survival hinges on this series of events that are, well, almost impossible.
And it all starts with a secret underground partnership. The official term is mycorrhiza, but you can think of it as a life-or-death deal between the orchid and a fungus. You see, orchid seeds are like dust. They have practically zero food reserves. So for a seed to even have a chance, it has to be found and literally fed by a very specific type of fungus in the soil. No fungus, no orchid. It's that simple.
This just shows you how risky their journey really is. First, that tiny seed lands on the ground. It can't grow, it just waits. It has to wait for its fungal partner to show up and move in. Only then, fueled by the fungus, does it start to grow into this little tuber, a protocorm. And it does all of this underground, in the dark, for years. Sometimes more than a decade, before it finally has enough energy to poke its very first leaf up into the sunlight.
So, let's say our orchid survives this crazy underground marathon and finally blooms. Now what? Well, it faces its next huge challenge, getting pollinated. And to solve this, some orchids have evolved one of the most incredible, mind-blowing strategies in the entire plant kingdom.
Okay, get this. We're looking at the Orchid genus, things like the bee orchid and the fly orchid. These guys are masters of sexual deception. The flower's lip doesn't just look like a female insect, it feels like one. And the craziest part, it releases the exact same chemical scent, the same pheromones. So a male insect comes along, gets completely fooled, and tries to mate with the flower. And in all the confusion, he accidentally picks up pollen or drops some off. It is an absolutely brilliant, if maybe a little sneaky trick.
Other orchids have different plans. The amazing lady slipper, for instance, uses what's called a kettle trap. An insect gets lured into that big pouch-like petal. But once it's in, the only way out is through this tiny one-way tunnel that just happens to force it right past the pollen. It's a beautiful and totally inescapable little machine.
All right, so let's hit pause on that wild and dangerous world for a second and switch gears. Let's talk about the orchid most of us actually know. We're leaving the forest floor and heading for the windowsill.
The scale of the commercial orchid business is just hard to wrap your head around. The market for just one type, the Phalaenopsis or moth orchid, is worth almost $2 billion this year alone. It's not just a plant, it's a global commodity, a whole different universe from that rare flower hiding out on a hill somewhere.
And this business has really consolidated. I mean, Germany buys a ton of orchids, but its own domestic production has been dropping. Why? Because the market is now dominated by these enormous, super automated greenhouses in the Netherlands that can turn out millions and millions of perfect, identical plants.
So why this one orchid? Why the Phalaenopsis? Well, because it has been basically perfected for us. It's tough as nails, it blooms for months on end, and it absolutely loves the exact same warm, centrally heated homes that we do. It's really less of a wild plant now and more of a living piece of home decor.
Okay, but this is where the story takes a really cool, unexpected twist. While a lot of those wild orchids are in decline out in the country, some of them are doing something totally wild. They're moving to the city.
For a long time, the story has been pretty grim. You hear about habitat loss and agricultural pollution, especially all the nitrogen from fertilizers, which ruins the poor soils these orchids need to survive. So you start to wonder, are they all just doomed to vanish, except for in a few protected nature reserves?
Well, not exactly. Everybody meet the broadleaved helleborine. This little guy is turning out to be a seriously tough urban pioneer. It's not just getting by in cities. In a lot of places, it's actually thriving.
So what is going on here? How is this possible? Well, it turns out cities, surprisingly, have a few things orchids like. All the construction digs up the soil, which mimics the natural disturbances they look for. There are tons of different pollinators like wasps and bees, and those crucial fungi they need, they're often already there, hanging out with the roots of street trees. And here's the kicker. Studies are showing that these city orchids are often bigger and more successful than the ones still living out in the forest. How wild is that?
Now, this amazing resilience doesn't mean wild orchids are in the clear. Not at all. Their future still really depends on us, on conservation, on awareness, and on the direct involvement of people who actually care.
One of the best tools they have for this in Germany is the Orchid of the Year program. Every year, conservation groups pick one species to shine a big spotlight on. So for 2024, it's a species that's threatened by that nitrogen pollution we talked about. For 2025, it's one that relies on moths to get us thinking about nocturnal pollinators. It's a super smart way to raise awareness.
And the threats aren't just invisible things like pollution. The beauty of these flowers actually makes them a target. Some of the rarest populations of lady slipper orchids are so sought after by illegal collectors that they need 24-hour security guards just to protect them while they're in bloom.
But here's the good news. There is this amazing force fighting back: citizen science. We're talking about networks of thousands of volunteers who are basically the eyes and ears of orchid conservation. They monitor populations, they manage habitats, and they gather data on a scale that professionals could only dream of.
And their impact is massive. I mean, just one project called Orchid Observers had volunteers submit more than 50,000 observations. That data is absolutely vital for scientists trying to figure out how climate change is affecting when these super-sensitive plants flower.
So we end up with this incredible duality, don't we? Is the wild orchid this fragile indicator of a natural world we're losing, or is it a symbol of surprising, tough resilience in the face of incredible change? Its story, this whole saga of deception, partnership, and adaptation, really, it tells us a lot about our own complicated relationship with the world around us.